Let me tell you about a case that didn't lead to litigation, but caused considerable concern and time for all personnel involved. Despite Transportation Department policy, a driver neglected to check the IDs of high school students and allowed a girl who wasn't a bus rider at all to board the bus. Her reason for getting on? Well, she had told 2 other girls that she wanted to join a gang. The girls told her she could jump in and directed the wannabe gang member to board a particular bus, their bus. The 3 girls arrived at the park where the bus stopped, and gang members beat our victim up badly. That was her initiation. The director of transportation didn't even learn about the matter until 10 days later, when a letter from the parents' attorney arrived at the school district. The parents were convinced that the girl would never have been attacked were it not for the bus driver allowing her to ride the bus. Yes, the initiation might have taken place another way, but would you want your violation of the rules to be linked to serious harm to a student? Does your policy require you to check to be sure the student has a right to ride? If so, do you check bus passes, eligibility lists, or any other form of ID? What are you looking for? Pay especially close attention to a student you don't recognize. What is the expectation if you know or suspect a student isn't supposed to be riding the bus? I'm afraid I've saved the most heartbreaking story for last. I know what your reaction to this one will be, because I've told this story many times to drivers in many places. I'm confident that they don't soon forget the story of Andrew Turner, whose school bus driver brought him home half an hour early one day. Since 2 children who usually rode the bus were not on the bus that afternoon, the driver decided to modify her route and arrived at Andrew's house approximately 30 minutes earlier than the normal arrival time of 4:18. She was well aware that Mr. Turner's car was normally in the driveway because he made sure to be home in time for his son Andrew's arrival. On this day, when she arrived a half hour early, the car wasn't there.
It's okay.
7-year-old Andrew assured the driver that he had a key, and she allowed him to get off the bus. The driver worried about her decision and later testified that she was so distracted by her concern over what she had done that she missed her next stop and had to turn back. Well, Andrew didn't have his key that day, and wanting to get into the house, he found another way. Mr. Turner arrived home at about 4 o'clock. We can't begin to imagine his horror. He found Andrew unconscious and trapped in the window, which had closed on the boy, pinning him between the window and sill. Andrew was rushed to the hospital, but never regained consciousness and died 5 days later. If you're like other drivers who have heard this story, you're worrying about whether you can drop a student at a bus stop if his parent isn't there to meet him. You're concerned about whether there's an age at which you can let a student enter his house alone if you know his or her parent isn't home. Your mind is firing any number of questions about this story. But it's important that you recognize the elements of this case that distinguish it from others you might be thinking about. The court said this is not a situation where the bus driver was unaware that no one was at the house. Moreover, the opinion notes that this is not a case where the bus driver arrived at the house at the designated time. And the district had a consistent published schedule in place so that the parents of young children would know when to expect them. When you detour from established rules, you create an unsafe situation, the very thing we all try so hard to avoid. If you have no stated obligation to deliver students to parents waiting at the bus stop, you're probably okay if no one is there. On the other hand, if your district or company policy is to insist that parents meet their children at the stop, you need to know what your responsibility is if a parent is not accounted for on any given day. In general, call for direction and don't release the student. Ask supervisors for direction whether your state or district policy mandates a student must be a specific age before they can be released unattended. Will that age work if the student is disabled or is in charge of several siblings? Talk with your supervisors about their expectations of you when unforeseen circumstances create a change in schedules, and follow those expectations. And be very clear about your responsibilities to notify the right people if change is unavoidable. My goal in talking with you today has not been, of course, that you quit your job or turn in your license or in fear of the tragic events that can happen because of a mistake. Instead, I want you to think of this video like a pre-trip inspection, intended to help you discover any potential problems before they happen. The rule is simple. Know your procedures and follow them. When injury to students occurs despite your following the rules, you won't be responsible. But when you do not adhere to established procedures or create your own stops or schedules, you may find yourselves at risk of liability, or at least faced with the possibility of loss of your job while wrestling with your grief. If the rules don't appear to cover a decision you must make, call for help from others. Think back on the situations I've talked about today. Each one was preventable. None of them had to happen. You bid the route. You get the schedule. You know stops. It's predictable. It's consistent. You know the routine. You understand the rules. Follow them. Our young people are depending on you.